Wow.
I've got the peace. I got the... Remember that song?
Is that a song?
It's not.
Was it a kids ministry song?
Remember that song, I got that joy down to my heart?
Oh, yeah. You were just changing the words.
I got the peace down to my heart. Peace. Peace, brother.
Today we have Katherine Krueger on, and she tells...
Executive assistant extraordinaire, by the way.
Yeah, and Frankie Post, but obviously Katherine's the center of the show today, and man, it's heavy.
We're going to start off heavy or we're going to start light?
No, we're going to start light, but I think we should probably give our people a little bit of a trigger warning.
I'm telling you, I would not want to miss this podcast. That is for certain. It is a good one.
Hit us with that intro, and then I want to talk about Christmas music.
Man, all right. Hey, welcome to Community Bible, our 61st minute podcast. And I'm Tim Homa, and I'm with my co-host and good friend, Nick Krueger. And today is a good one.
Hey, so here's the question on Christmas music.
Yeah.
All right. I gotta set up the scene.
I'm ready.
All right. You're in your house.
It's snowing.
It's snowing, yeah. Ooh, it can snow. All right. Yeah. The lights are dim. You have the kind of the warm light lamps on, but you don't have none of the harsh light. Like your Christmas tree looks great.
Yep.
There's fire in the fireplace.
I know where you're going, buddy.
The whole vibe.
Yep.
What kind of music or what specific Christmas song is on?
Oh, the weather outside
Are you serious?
is frightful.
That surprises me.
But the fire is absolutely going there. Old traditional, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, oh man, Mel Torme.
I guess just that specific
Al Martino.
song.
Man, that song, well, yeah, but that style of that song.
Yeah.
Like, or...
See, that one's it. That one's mine.
See,
that one or I'll be home for Christmas. Right?
Oh yeah, see, and traditional with the guys of old, with the times of old, man. Yeah, those are the songs. But I always, because remember we talked about this before. Christmas was bad weather growing up. Mm-hmm. It was always a white Christmas.
Yeah,
it was nasty, cold. So it always is the memory that I go to around this time of the year is. The weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. It's that imagery of being indoors, a Christmas tree lit up, there's presents, you're having eggnog, you got the fire going. It's just awesome in the house.
Well, it's funny, and the reason I bring it up is I don't know what it is deep down in my soul, but very rarely am I picking up like the super uplifting, like upbeat, like kind of silly Christmas
No, it's
music.
The memory song.
No, I want to sit down and like, there's almost a little bit of a sadness to it because you're like thinking of Christmases of old. And I'm like, why do I do this to myself?
I do, man. I think for the better part of my life, most of my Christmases have been pretty cool. Pretty good.
Yeah.
And so when I do hear Christmas music, I'm not triggered something in the past that didn't go well. Now, obviously, there are things that have happened recently. I lost my stepdad 2 days before Christmas 2 years ago, and so that is a new memory. That's a new trigger. That's a sadness. Overall, yeah, I go back to those songs that are they're melancholy, but
that's what's interesting. With me losing my mom a few years ago, the songs bring me back to when we did Christmases when Mom was there. Yeah. And I think that's almost why I want to relive it. So it's almost, there's a sad part to it, but there's also like...
It takes you back to something.
You feel like it's back to normal again. But no, that's interesting that you say that. But I want like kind of the jazzy feel, kind of sit back, enjoy the fire,
Oh, yeah, I do. It's the eggnog. It's just that song. And
Dude, we just can't get away from people passing away right now. Like this whole podcast.
I know,
Golly, man.
I know. Well, it is a deep one, and I think you're all going to enjoy it. I hope you take the time to listen to it. It's a good one.
Yesterday was a big day for Community Bible Church. We did our Live Beyond Sunday, Frankie did a wonderful job having to cut down a sermon to 10 minutes and still teach on peace. Frankie, give us a little bit of what you talked about.
Yeah, so talked about two things, really 2 points, was that peace comes with God and from God, and just really separated those two by looking at Mary with the first one and Joseph with the second one, and just processing the fact that, she's somewhere between 13 and 16 potentially, and the news of the weight and the heaviness that was put on her, just crazy, and how she handled it.
Yeah. And I also should mention that we have Katherine Krueger with us today. Katherine works with us here at Community Bible Church, and she is one of the coolest people I know. So, Katherine, thanks for being here.
That was a lot to live up to. Hello. Glad
a
to
lot
be here.
to live up to. So, when we're talking about peace, what was one of the things that I see in the two stories, Frankie? Naturally, Joseph has a response to Mary that I think is probably a response most people would have, if not all people, right? Like, man, she's losing her mind, right? Like, I'm not going to believe this.
Right.
And it takes an intervention from God to convince him, hey, she's telling the truth. I mean, what is your take on Joseph's response versus Mary's response? I mean, Mary, she seems to have but the angel approaches Mary like right off the bat, right? So it's easier, probably a little easier for her to go, okay, I'm convinced of this. But Joseph, I mean, do you think he had a response that lacked peace or required more faith? Or do you think, hey, that's probably a pretty justified response? Does that make sense?
Well, I think there's two responses, right? I think first off, he's already processed that quietly he's going to divorce her, or, there was the Moses approach that he had that law, he had that permission, he had that ability to just write her that certificate to be done and it'd be a peaceful thing. I think he was older. That goes into the theory of, why he's not present when Jesus is in his ministry. So if he was 30 at this point and she's 13 to 16, that was not that far off in a normal situation back then. But for Joseph, I think that was just his plan, was like, hey, I'm just going to divorce her. I'll be as quiet and kind. And that's a kind way. It could have been a flogging. It could have been a public, disgrace and everything else. And so I think that he was just doing probably the cultural common thing in that moment. I don't want to give him too much credit, but I don't know.
With that, I mean, you have a story of a life-altering scenario that happens. And you see, well, side note, I think of the conversation. A lot of people think of the conversation between Mary and Joseph when Mary first tells him she's pregnant. Like, are you serious, Mary? You think I'm supposed to believe this?
Right.
I can't. I'm then curious of the conversation that happened after the angel met with Joseph, and he comes back and Mary's like, "You didn't believe me? Like, I told you this." Anyway, that must have been fun. But with all that being said, life-altering news, right? Mary's response just shows so much peace, so much trust that God knows what he's doing. And Katherine, this is where trying to figure out, okay, how do we navigate life-altering, scenarios? A little bit about your story, which I'll ask you. Would you mind kind of walking us through kind of your husband, Zach, and kind of what his fight with COVID looked like, dates about when that approximately happened?
Sure. So back in 2020 when COVID came on the scene, we had a 3-year-old daughter, Eliza, who is now 7, and I was pregnant with Joel, who's now 4, and I had Joel November 9th, and 5 days later, Zach got COVID. And so back at that time, it was new. And so there was so much that we just didn't know, we want to quarantine, especially with a newborn baby. Are they more prone to illness or, deathly consequences, things like that? And so Zach quarantined and I was with the kids. And so he was with them for those first 5 days when Joel was born. But then after that, he got super sick with COVID. He got double pneumonia, and they put him in ICU. And anyway, he ended up getting put on a ventilator. He was, my mom also was helping us at the time with a newborn baby. And so she also got COVID and got double pneumonia, was put in the hospital. And so both of them were in the hospital at the same time at Mercy. And so Zach ended up getting put on a ventilator. They medically induced a coma. So it's kind of crazy unpacking all this because I haven't really said the timeline in a long time. He was in a medically induced coma for, let's see, it's almost 40 days. I think it was like 37. And
Holy cow.
yeah. And my mom was in the hospital for like 2 weeks. She ended up coming home, and they had to put her on oxygen. So she was incredibly weak. She was at my house as well. And so she was able to, help some with the kids, but I mean, she was very ill as well. So Zach, we would call the hospital and the nurses would let me see him through a Zoom. But at that time, because COVID was still new, you couldn't go visit. So it's not like I could go and sit by his bedside or anything. I literally could only Zoom him. And like I said, he's in a coma, so it's not like he's, responding or anything. During that time, he'd gotten some blood clots. And so, his lungs had collapsed, both of them, on Christmas Day. And so, they're calling me in the middle of the night. Luckily, I have a newborn. And so I'm up in the middle of the night nursing. And, anyway, so, they're, I'm just trusting his medical team. I felt like they handled him so well and were very communicative with me, but I know that they had a million things going on. I mean, they had huge caseloads at the time too and stuff. So it was just chaotic. I mean, I'm trying the best I can to take care of my little ones, and that transition of just having 2 kids instead of 1, and then my mom's home and Zach's not there, and so it was just chaotic. But Zach did end up, cutting to the end. I mean, he's miraculously healed now. He woke up from his coma, which was huge. That was a huge turning point, but it also wasn't, they told me he's not out of the woods yet. There's a lot of healing to go. He ended up getting a trach in it, so he didn't have to be on the ventilator anymore. And so he had lots of physical therapy. He had to learn how to walk again, how to use the bathroom, all the things again, because he had been in a hospital bed for so long. So it ended up being about 3 months that he was in the hospital. And then, just figuring out life after that. When he came home, he was not the same and super weak. I had to help him, get to the bathroom, get out of bed, get to, the chair, all the
while
things.
with a newborn.
With a newborn and a 3-year-old.
And a 3-year-old.
And a sick mom. Yeah.
Oh.
So before we get to the recovery process, there was a point where it got the lowest it got. I remember Frankie and I were hanging out at his garage because the staff text was going out like it wasn't looking great. About what point was that? Do you remember?
I think it was...
Was it about midway through the coma?
Yeah, it was it was somewhere between December 21st and the 25th. I think it was right around the 20...
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Because I think I remember Angel Tree being close to it. But anyway, with all that being said, obviously a life-altering story. Right? We're talking about Mary and Joseph having a baby. Have no idea what God's doing. Your husband potentially on his deathbed. Mm-hmm. What does peace look like for you in that moment?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this yesterday when I was listening to Frankie speak about how peace comes from God and there's peace with God. And, I know the Lord. I know him, and the more that you have a relationship with the Lord and that you're walking with him, you study his word and you know what he says, and you continue to grow. And so that's not only peace with God of that relationship, but then continuing to know him more. You just know more of his character, and then peace from God, that peace that transcends all understanding. I truly did experience that. I felt like I had an army of people around me, and I did. People who prayed, people who brought us food, people who just meeting our needs, and where I felt like I was on the front lines of this like spiritual war, and that, and not to over spiritualize it, but God just gave me such like clear, truly like peace and perspective in the situation where it's like, I'm taking care of you. This is so uncertain and terrifying, but like I've got you. And I could go into details of just specifics and things, but
I want to ask you a question though, Catherine, because I think it's interesting, because I think we all want to experience that level of peace. I think
Sure.
when we go through things, but sometimes we are swayed by the people in our lives
Sure.
who don't have that same maybe confidence, peace, outlook. I'm not saying that they're the doomsdayers, but they're the ones that are like, okay, let's be realistic here. There's a chance that Zach's not going to pull through. And did you at all during that season feel that kind of pull away from the peace of God that you were experiencing? Did you ever feel like maybe this isn't the peace that I need? Or, I mean, you know what I'm saying? That sometimes people can take away, not as on purpose, but just from their outlook. Did you experience that at all? Did you have people that you like, that those voices started to weigh heavier than God's word?
Yeah, I had both. So you just brought a great point that I didn't really think about, but there was a lot of like isolation for me in that I was home with little ones. And so I didn't have a lot of like, I wasn't like in public spaces where people could give a lot of feedback like that other than social media. I mean, I used Facebook like it was a journal, not only to communicate what was happening to Zach with our family that lives far away, but I think it really was like therapeutic for me to be able to just process what was happening. And I mean, that's how Frankie and I became friends.
Yep.
And I got to know Nick better during that time, and other people at the church. So part of it is that I wasn't around a lot of people to where we're just having these conversations. The interactions were more like taking care of me, sending us money, sending us prayers, sending us scripture. There were people who, especially once more people started following along with what was going on, because COVID was still kind of new. There were people who didn't know us, because it's a lot easier to, throw darts or throw arrows or whatever to people that you don't know. So there were people who said things that I, that was not encouragement, not giving me the courage that I needed at the moment. So yeah, that's real. And there was a time in the very beginning when Zach got the medically induced coma that I was sitting it was like 2 a.m. I was sitting at the dinner table with my mom in the middle of the night. She was back from being out of the hospital, and I just said, this like cannot be our story. This cannot be my kid's story. This cannot end here for them. I don't want it to end here for me, but like, I'll be okay. Like, God will take care of us. We'll figure it out. But like, I don't want this for them. The hospital at one point called me in before Zach woke up. They told me, we need to figure out like a will. We need to figure out like end of life wishes, all of that stuff. And so, this is like a secret, but they did let me come in at that point and say goodbye to him, when he was, in his coma. And so that was a really powerful time because, sorry. I know.
Golly, that's heavy.
Dang.
I got to be in there for like an hour and just pray over him, and they snuck me in. had some nurses in there with me and stuff. And I don't know, it was just, I knew God was with me. It's like his presence and his whisper was so loud to me in that time. There have been times, I mean, now, like there's times in my life where, you know, God doesn't feel as near. It's not that he doesn't care or is not close to us, but
like not as near. Everyone's healthy, things are good, but you're in the deepest, darkest part of what the world would say of life, and you felt closer to God
than ever. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Absolutely. The Lord kept saying 40 to me, 40, and then you know I go back and it's like, oh my gosh, it's been Zach woke up 40 days after he got COVID was when his eyes opened. After that 40 days was when he came home. 40 is a biblical number. You can, you know, look into that and stuff. And so God was really real. But like, yeah, Nick, what you were just saying is like, there are times in my life where there's chaos, there's financial instability, you lose a job, somebody gets sick, things are hard. And those are real problems too. And maybe God doesn't feel as near. Like that's certainly real in my life too. And so it's not like I always have this peace that transcends all understanding, you know, but in this situation that we're talking about with Zach, I absolutely experienced that. And I think a lot of it has to do with prayer around me. I think a lot of it has to do with people just coming alongside us and taking care of us. And just really choosing to have faith and believe in the ability of God beyond anything. I knew that God could, without a shadow of a doubt, heal Zach. I believed it. I believed that he could clear Zach's lungs like he could part the sea. That was 100% just faith. I believed that. But whether he would or not, whether that's his will or not, that's not in my hands. That's not something I can control.
I'm curious. You might, Frankie, see this in the recovery world. I wonder when we make the proper choice to pursue after Jesus in those dark moments. I wonder if that's why we feel so close. Because we respond to hardship in a way that drives us closer to Jesus. Like seek and you'll find, you know. Whereas naturally most people when facing a life situation that is altering, they do one of two things. They run to God or run away from God. And those that run away from God, I could only imagine makes life so much more difficult. Whereas when you make the conscious decision to turn to Jesus and to seek after him, I don't know how that's going to look, whether it's prayer, whether it's, biblical community around you, however you do that. I wonder if that's the part where it finds why Catherine's able to say, I felt closer to God in the moment I was uncertain about my husband living. Frankie, what's your take on that?
Yeah, we usually, in the recovery world, we use the phrase of God never wastes a hurt. And it is in those moments where, it's the fight or flight. You have options. But there is a closeness that's there for people that said, I have this faith or this peace like that surpasses all. It comes from him. And so there's a depth to that, as believers, you have that opportunity to experience. It's different for everybody and how they process it and move forward with it or run from it. But yeah, there's a lot of times where I see people, they come, in the recovery world or their darkest day or their heaviest day. And as they begin to process that or dive into it to say, okay, it's like they've come to grips with it, whatever that it is for them, they are able to then embrace it and move forward. And we always see someone who can then look back and say, man, I praise God for that. As crazy as that may sound, for whatever their situation is, they're always able to say, I praise God for that valley.
There's a conversation I was having with an older man that's a member of our church. And he was telling me he's just getting a little older and his health is kind of declining. And he was telling me, he said, I'm not scared to die. He said, I don't want to face the months leading up to death, but I'm not scared of death. And, it's actually, believe it or not, something I think about frequently. Yeah. Because you hear people that come to grips with the peace that they find with death or what's next. And here I am, a pastor who can honestly say death terrifies me and the uncertainty of it. I don't know if it's because I'm young and I still want to see Jones grow up or what that might be, but I would assume there's probably a lot of listeners out there or people who are going to listen to this podcast that can honestly say, like, yeah, death's scary. And, you know, I've done hospital visits with people on their deathbed where, you know, some of them are like, I'm ready to go see Jesus. And some of the, you know, most faithful Christians I know, you could see how terrified they were in their, you know, as they were moving on to go see God. And there's a peace, but for those of us who have the hardest time kind of coming to grips with, okay, that's going to happen someday, and no, it is scary. Like, what's that look like? You were going to say something, Tim.
The Old Testament clearly states that our days are numbered. There's a number for all of us. That number can be for somebody in their 30s.
Right.
It's God's design. God has written our story. The days of our life are already written. And the hard thing is getting to the point where you accept that, because selfishly you don't want to leave the ones you love because that's what you know.
Yeah, Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom."
So I did that at one
there's
time.
wisdom there.
I did that at one time in my life when I was younger and I was in college, and I just kind of did the life expectancy thing, and I wrote the number in my Bible at the time. It was like 15,000 days, or I don't know. I don't remember exactly the exact number. But so many people, though, and we've talked about this, and Katherine, you probably experienced this too, people who have gotten to the place of death is going to happen. There's a switch. I've talked to so many people over the years as a pastor. I am at peace with my life. They just get to a point where they go, I'm ready. I think you just get to a point in your walk with God, and I think it's a journey. Katherine got to that point where she said, God, I don't want Zach to die, but I trust your plan. Your plan trumps my desires. That's so hard because we think of all the good things of earth, and we don't multiply it by 100 or 1,000 what it's going to be like, and why the story behind death happens to be the story that God wants us to tell to the living. Think about that, because in death we can share what life is about and understanding that God's ways are so much greater and so much better than ours, but getting there is difficult.
And that's the thing. I mean, and I want you to hear me. I can say that, yeah, I truly do believe that, you know, heaven comes next, right, for those who follow Christ. But one thing I want to also stress, because, or maybe I am the only one. I don't know. I would assume I'm not the only one. Just because you're going through a life-altering situation, maybe like Katherine went, and you maybe don't find that peace in the moment, doesn't necessarily mean you're a broken Christian.
Right.
Right? Because I'm not going...
Means you're human.
Yeah, right? Or if I'm going to bed at night going, man, yeah, I'm a little scared of when that day comes. It's okay to, continue to pursue after that peace, but I just get a little nervous that sometimes, even in my own head, I'm sitting there going, man, why is one night I'm laying in bed staring at the ceiling fan, can't sleep, wondering, am I going to see mom again someday, right?
Yeah, there's a passage, I think it's Ecclesiastes 7:2. Solomon says, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for the living will take it to heart. And that idea is it's better to go to a funeral than it is to go to a wedding, because we who are here will process our own lives and think about the lives that we're living. And so even though this is a kind of a dark topic, it is a healthy topic for us to just go, what am I doing? Or what are we doing with our lives, and how are we going forward? And I'm certain that it's given Zach a whole new perspective of life, as well as Katherine and everybody that followed that beautiful, drastically difficult journey that they went through.
It makes me be not at peace to find a house like seem so trivial and like you're such an idiot, Tim.
Tim's been looking for a house. He's been renting for how long now?
5 months.
5 months.
And I'm not at peace about it. I want a house that I'm like going, I have no room. I am at peace now. I'm like, God, I trust you.
We're good with where we're at. Katherine, so you go from walking in to see Zach, talking about Will, like last moments, like, oh my goodness, to my man is at the Christmas party with me a few days ago, and we are just shooting the breeze, joking around. He's being just normal old Zach. What a recovery. And what does that process look like with your faith? Because 9 out of 10 of those stories don't end with recovery.
Way more than that. Yeah, it's a very slim percentage. And so Zach's pulmonologist, his lung doctor, said, like, she showed the scans to some of her colleagues. She said there's just no other explanation for his physical healing other than God, like that he doesn't have scarring and, scar tissue in his lungs that make it harder to breathe and things like that. And so physically, I mean, he's got a clean bill of health, and it truly is a miracle. And getting from him coming home to the hospital, I mean, he was in and out of the hospital. Once he came home, he was back in the hospital like 3 days later, and then there with infections and things. We've been in the hospital over 8 times since he came home. So it's not like it, was just like this black, white,
Over the span of how long? Those 8 times?
About 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. He had some kidney issues and stuff. He had kidney stones before, but he had kidney issues. He had, just some different infections, infectious disease.
All attributed to COVID.
Like I said, he had kidney stones since he was like 18 years old, but your kidneys are the ones that are like filtering and processing everything. So they are the ones that typically fail if you've been in the hospital for a really long time. And so, and they had talked to us about that when he was in the hospital, but luckily he never had to do like dialysis or anything. But like 8 times in a couple years. And I mean, the big part of this that people don't see, and so I was really public in sharing like my side of our story whenever he was in the hospital. And again, because I wanted to share information with our family that didn't live close by, and it just was easier to share information one time than to have to send a bunch of text messages or something when I had like kids going on. And again, it was also just like processing what was going on. The part that I feel like has been more intimate and personal is since he's been home, just the mental health side of it. I mean, he has PTSD. We've both been in therapy. We both deal with anxiety and depression. And so it's not like, oh, I got that peace in that season when he was sick, and that's just continued to, float me through life. It hasn't been like that. It's been letting professionals help us and continuing to trust God and learn how to communicate with each other, because we're different people and we've had really different experiences. And so, it has been a process. He and I would both say that this year, 2024, has been like the healthiest that our marriage has been. Definitely since all that happened, but maybe ever, because I feel like we finally gotten some tools in place to just be able to communicate and have some healing with our mental health. That's 4 years.
4
later.
years.
Yeah.
Katherine, thank you so much. I mean, for being transparent, authentic. I mean, I knew this story because of Richie, our senior pastor. He would tell me, because we're friends. We've been friends for years and years. So he told me about a guy named Zach. That's all I knew. Yeah. That he was in the hospital and it didn't look good. And we were praying for a guy named Zach in Texas way before there was ever a, community Bible experience for us. But hey, thanks for sharing.
Thank you for praying.
Man, what a story, man.
Yeah.
Nice job, Nick.
Well,
picked a good guest this week. Look at you.
Yeah.
I think
Frankie did good too.
He did pretty good.
Y'all are the professionals on this thing, though. Y'all are good at podcasting.
Well, Katherine, I really am. I'm thankful that I know that you said, even sometimes talking about it and having to kind of go through the whole story is tough. So
Right.
I do appreciate you coming. out to do
It
this,
benefited
and
me today. I tell you that.
I truly believe, one, it helps me because, after Mom passed away, I have had thoughts of, okay, what's next and why do I lack peace and things like that. But at the same time, I think there's a lot. I mean, we're all going to have to either face death ourselves. Well, yes, we will do that, or we'll face loved ones going through that and finding peace in the middle of it. Because one of the most heartbreaking things is when I'm in there and can be some faithful believers that I'm at a hospital visit with them and seeing in their faces when they still have the fear and not the peace going into it. I want people to be able to find that peace. Yeah. And I think you'll be able to help them with your story.
Frankie, last word.
Nick, when you said, hey, I'm going to have Katherine on, with talking about your sermon on peace and everything, I was like, that's a no-brainer. Because when she earlier said that her and I kind of got to know each other through that Facebook stuff, I was blown away by her, as she said, journaling on Facebook through that, because I was like, man, this girl, this woman, she knows God, and she knows how to communicate what she's going through in just a powerful way. The beauty of Facebook is we can go back and read those, right? And every now and then they still pop up on my feed. And I know that can be a trigger even for Zach and something like that of, here comes these dates and here comes these days where we were praying for him and, and all this stuff and him seeing that hindsight kind of thing. But for me, it just is a reminder of just how God was moving through her and spreading that and what he was doing for so many to be able to see and be a part of.
Awesome. Well, Katherine, thank you. Frankie, thank you. Tim?
Hey, that was a good one.
Good one.
All right.
All right, we'll see you guys later.
See you later.
Thank you for listening to the 61st Minute Podcast by Community Bible. Our goal is to release a new podcast every Wednesday reviewing what we discussed during our hour gathering the previous Sunday morning at Community Bible Church. If you don't have a church home, we would love for you to join us on Sundays at 9 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. live at any of our 4 campuses. Also, you can watch online or review Sunday morning sermon at communitychurch.com/messages. Again, that's communitychurch.com/messages. Tune in for next week's episode of the 61st Minute Podcast by Community Bible on main platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to your podcasts.